Okay, so we're going to try this again for the third time. I'm trying very hard to get this program online. Your assignment is to watch these videos. This is video 1 of 2. You need to come to class on Wednesday with one question from each of the videos. And then we will go through it. You'll probably take a little quiz on it. And after that, we will work in class on assignments that you would be doing at home. You're going to do them in class. If I can make this dang video stuff work. So, third try's the charm, right? Let's go with that. Alright, we're looking at August of 1942 here, the Battle of Stalingrad. The main important thing about the Battle of Stalingrad is the Nazis invaded, in violation of the Non-Aggression Pact, mind you, the Nazis invaded Stalingrad in the winter. That was such a stupid move. They should have learned from Napoleon. You can't invade the Soviet Union in the winter because it's really, really cold. Not to mention the Russians used a fantastic little thing they have called scorched earth policy. Causes the Nazis to have to retreat. The Soviets basically push the Nazis back into Europe, back in toward Germany. As the Soviets go and they're pushing the Nazis back to Germany, whenever the Soviets quote-unquote liberate a country, they take out the Nazis in that country, they kick them out, but they establish communists. So basically what you're doing in the Eastern European countries is you're kicking out the Nazi officials, but you're replacing them with the Stalinists and with the Stalin's guys. So you're replacing one dictator with another, which is terrible. Absolutely awful. We're going to skip ahead here a lot to the fall of Italy. Finally, when the Italians fall, which is, they basically have to fall twice, but in the final fall, you get the I think these are the British guys, entering here, through the little tip of Sicily there. When they enter, apparently the Italian resistance movement was pretty strong at the time. We've all talked about Mussolini's death. We know that he's pulled out of a van trying to escape, or excuse me, pulled out of a truck trying to escape, beaten, shot, hung upside down at a gas station where they threw stuff at them. I don't know what's going on with that guy. Interesting. Okay, D-Day's fantastic. This is when the Allies decide they're going to retake France. If you remember, France had been taken over by the Germans, and what was it called? That's right, Vichy France. And who was in charge of Vichy France? Oh, good! French World War I hero Henri Pétain. Good job. Well, this is when they're going to try. The Allies are going to try and take France back. This is an incredible planning operation. The Allies knew that the Germans were listening to this particular radio broadcast or signal. So we set up this fake invasion at the beach at Calais, which is a few miles away from Normandy, where the actual invasion was going to take place. But we set up this really cool fake invasion, complete with fake tanks, like blow-up boats, noise machines that made it sound like a battle. So they kind of set up a phony battle down on the beaches of Calais, and then a few miles later, there was the actual battle. The purpose of the phony battle was as a way to, like, draw the Nazis off. So there was a big, huge Nazi battle, or Nazi army down there ready to fight the Allies in Calais, when in fact there weren't really Allies in Calais. So that was pretty cool. Eisenhower sort of arranges the whole thing, and then Patton leads the troops inward. Obviously works pretty well, because we know that that France is liberated. Here's a very famous photo of the U.S. and the Soviet troops meeting at the Elbe River. We all know that in April of 1945, that's when Hitler went into this underground bunker, stays there for a little while, I guess it was a couple of weeks. And then when it became very clear that they were about to be taken over, that's when he commits suicide with his wife, who he'd been married to for, I think, less than 24 hours. He shot himself and she took cyanide pills. Leads us to Victory in Europe Day. So now we've taken care of the Italians. They are in the business of forming their republic, and their leaders and their fascist leaders dead. The Germans have been overrun by Allied forces, and their leader committed suicide. Oh wait, we still have Japan. So we still got to figure out what we're going to do with the Japanese. This is where you get the conferences. Yalta and Potsdam. You'll notice Yalta is before Hitler's suicide and before VE Day. Potsdam is after. The consistent is Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin is in both of them. The things that are different are FDR, who is clearly, you can see there, he's very tired. In fact, he dies 2 months after the Yalta Conference. But when he dies, Truman takes over. And then Winston Churchill's party didn't get the majority in Parliament the next time. So while he's still a member of Parliament, he's not the Prime Minister anymore. They sent the new guy, Clement Attlee. So you've got some very different personalities between the Yalta and the Potsdam conferences. Yalta is basically in Stalin's backyard. I don't know, maybe that's why he got away with so much stuff. Stalin got away with murder at the Yalta conference. Stuff that really we shouldn't have let him get away with. Issue number 1 is Germany. What are we going to do with Germany at this? We can remember they were not divided up in World War I. They divided up Austria-Hungary, but they didn't divide up Germany. So at the end of World War II, we decided, okay, we're going to divide up Germany. This is the Soviet sector. That's the Western European sector and the American sector. These eventually join, and that becomes West Germany. This becomes East Germany. So these 3 parts right there kind of join into one. This part becomes a Soviet satellite until 1989. Issue number 2 is what are we going to do with all those places that the Soviets occupied when they kicked out the Nazis, particularly Poland. This is why Yalta is kind of considered a betrayal to Eastern Europe, because we essentially let Stalin have it. We told him that he had to have free elections, which of course he didn't have, but we told him that he had to have free elections, but he could sort of control the elections. He didn't have free elections at all. In fact, when the Polish guys went to go meet with Stalin, he arrested them all and sent them to some Siberian work camp. So that wasn't nice. Alright, issue number 3 is the United Nations. This is supposed to be like the League of Nations, only, like, you know, effective. The way it works is, you've got the Security Council, which are these guys right there. They are the ones that control the military. This becomes an ineffective body too, unfortunately. It's such a good idea. But particularly during the Cold War, you've got 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Now, all 5 of these members of the Security Council can veto each other. So during the Cold War, every time the United States tried to do something, the Soviet Union would veto it, and vice versa. Every time the Soviet Union wanted to do something, the United States would veto it. So, unfortunately, the United Nations became a relatively weak body, which is too bad, because, again, it's such a good idea. Alright, we still have to do Potsdam. That's July 1945. And the main issue is, okay, the Japanese are still fighting with kamikazes. That's really hard to defend. What are we going to do? When Truman showed up, he knew he already knew about the bomb. He didn't tell them about it, but he knew that we already had the bomb, and so, frankly, he didn't really need Stalin's help on anything. He knew that we had a bigger gun. So I'm sure that sort of affected their relationship some. I did kind of want to bring this up, the idea that the settlements at Yalta and Potsdam definitely lead to the Cold War. All the stuff over here, all that stuff that the Soviet Union controlled, they say indirectly, but all of these governments of these quote-unquote independent nations had to report to Moscow. And then you've got the non-communist side over here. What is this big, thick, black line in the middle of it? Oh, good, that's right, it's the Iron Curtain. Not a literal curtain, just a dividing line between the non-communist and the communist-dominated Europe. Alright, so Japanese surrender, I think we talked about this a little bit on the first day when we did the pre-test. Definitely an example of total war. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not military bases. They were industrial centers, and they had some military there, but so did every Japanese city. The reason why Truman, I think, elected to do this was because he figured, well, my job is to protect American soldiers' lives. I'm going to have to do that I'm going to have to put a value on them over the value of the Japanese citizenry. This is thanks to a student in 6th period who mentioned, hey, I thought we dropped leaflets informing them that we were going to drop the bomb over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I went and looked it up, and he's right. There were flyers, this is obviously a translated version of the flyer, But there were flyers basically saying what was going to happen, and then at the bottom, evacuate your cities. So that makes me feel a little bit better. At least we tried to not bomb them all. Leads to victory in Japan Day. Obviously, it was a great big party. You okay? Alright, so what happens to the losing countries? Again, the big deal is, we know the Paris Peace Conference was bad. We know that there were a lot of problems with it, namely blaming Germany for the entire war, the ridiculously unreasonable reparations payment that nobody would revisit until reasonable people got elected. So they have to be able to make peace without screwing things up like they did in 1919. Italy's pretty smooth. I mean, frankly, there already was apparently a huge resistance movement to the fascists anyway. So they become a republic and have had economics problems since then, but other than that, it goes pretty smoothly. Germany, we already talked about how they were divided up. They did put the Nazi leaders on trial. That's the Nuremberg trials. We'll talk about them later. And then Japan, they demilitarized Japan, but protected Japan. That actually worked out pretty well for them, and not so well for us. Because the Japanese weren't spending any money on their military, because they had the protection from the Allied powers, they funneled all the money that they would have spent on the military into technological goods and researching and developing consumer products. Which is why they go from being a bombed out nation in 1945 to 1970 and 80. They're kicking our butts in the international markets. Because, again, they didn't have to pay for a military for quite a few years. So, whoops. Emperor Hirohito had to admit that he wasn't a god. I'm sure that was a fun conversation. And then, again, the process of revival for them, too. At the end of it all, you really only have two countries with a viable military and then the money to back up their military. That's the United States and the Soviet Union. Very different ideologies. Both consider each other expansionistic and aggressive. So that leads you into the Cold War. Okay, guys, thanks very much. I'm about to cough to death, so I appreciate you.